5FA did the fabled trench gun really turn the tide in the Pacific? Did the thunderous roar of American shotguns truly shatter Japanese morale and tactics in the brutal jungles of World War II? Or has a dramatic, cinematic legend overshadowed a more complex, perhaps even poignant, historical truth? Prepare to uncover the stark reality behind one of the Pacific theater's most enduring, yet often misunderstood, combat narratives. From 1942 to 1945, the unforgiving expanse of the Pacific theater became a cauldron of human endurance and savage conflict. Here, beneath the suffocating canopy of dense jungle undergrowth across countless islands, a unique and utterly terrifying combat environment materialized. Engagements were not fought at sprawling distances, but often erupted with shocking immediacy, with adversaries finding themselves less than 30 yards apart, sometimes even toe-to-toe in the suffocating green hell. It was into this crucible of close quarters terror that the United States Marine Corps unleashed a weapon intended to fundamentally challenge, if not outright shatter, every deeply held assumption Japanese forces harbored about the very nature of modern warfare, the formidable 12-gauge pump-action shotgun. While the definitive historical record of the shotgun's specific combat impact remains elusive and somewhat scattered, the mere presence of these Winchester Model 1897 and Model 1912 shotguns within Marine units, steadfastly serving throughout the relentless Pacific campaign, represented a tactical capability for which the Imperial Japanese military doctrine had simply made no provision whatsoever. For decades, the Imperial Japanese Army had meticulously honed its martial traditions and diligently prepared for the looming specter of war against the Western powers. Their extensive training manuals detailed the intricacies of British rifles, the destructive power of American machine guns, the precise trajectory of French mortars, and the rapid fire capability of Soviet submachine guns. Yet, shotguns' weapons they culturally dismissed as crude tools fit only for hunting fowl, rather than sophisticated instruments of war, never once appeared within their meticulous tactical considerations. This profound cultural and strategic oversight, a blind spot rooted in deeply ingrained military philosophy, would prove to be a critically significant miscalculation in the face of the emerging brutal realities of jungle combat. As the crucible of World War II intensified, American forces flooded the front lines with an impressive arsenal, including approximately 25,000 Model 97 shotguns and a staggering 60,000 to 80,000 Model 12s pressed into military service. This immense material superiority stood in stark contrast to the core of Japanese military doctrine in 1942, which centered on cultivating an almost mystical spiritual power, a collective, fighting spirit, Seo-Seishin believed capable of overcoming even the most crushing material disadvantages. This philosophy wasn't merely empty propaganda. It was a desperate, yet calculated, response to a brutal industrial reality. Japan, a nation with limited resources, could barely produce more steel in an entire year than America churned out in a single month. The Imperial Army's deeply ingrained, and indeed brave, solution to this overwhelming disparity was to forge each individual soldier into a superior warrior, particularly in close quarters combat where sheer spirit, rigorous training, and unwavering resolve were meant to prevail over the cold, mechanical efficiency of their enemies' advanced weaponry. The tactical manifestation of this doctrine was chillingly effective: the silent, stealthy night infiltration attack, followed by an explosive, close-quarters melee fought with rifle and bayonet. Japanese infantry trained relentlessly in these terrifying tactics, which had proven devastatingly successful against Chinese forces, British troops entangled in Malaya, and American defenders caught unprepared in the Philippines. The standard engagement sequence was chillingly clear: approach, under the impenetrable cloak of darkness, infiltrate enemy lines with surgical precision, then overwhelm the unsuspecting defenders at point-blank range, where the Japanese soldiers' legendary superiority in hand-to-hand combat would, they believed, prove utterly decisive. However, the raw, brutal firepower of American shotguns threatened to invalidate this meticulously crafted tactical framework entirely. In those claustrophobic, close-range encounters where Japanese doctrine anticipated undisputed dominance, a Marine armed with a Winchester Model 97 could unleash a torrent of 6 loads of Zausen buckshot in approximately 2 heart-stopping seconds. Thanks to the weapon's infamous slam-fire capability, each of those shells disgorged 9 devastating .33 caliber pellets, creating a wide, unforgiving spread pattern that made missing an enemy target in the dense, tangled jungle vegetation almost an impossible feat. The Winchester Model 1897, a robust and storied design by the legendary John Browning, meticulously refined over 45 years of continuous production, served as the primary Marine shotgun during the harrowing early Pacific campaigns. This formidable military version boasted a compact 20-inch barrel, encased by a perforated heat shield to protect the shooter, and most critically, a bayonet lug compatible with the menacing M1917 sword bayonet for the inevitable close-quarters savagery. Its most terrifying feature, however, was its intentional lack of a trigger disconnector, a design choice that enabled continuous, rapid fire by simply holding down the trigger while vigorously operating the pump action, transforming it into a veritable hose of lead. Later, the Model 1912, developed by Winchester engineer T.C. Johnson, subtly improved upon Browning's original design, incorporating an internal hammer mechanism that significantly reduced the risk of accidental discharge, a crucial enhancement in the chaotic environment of combat. By 1943, the Model 12 had largely superseded the Model 97 in Marine units, though both formidable weapons continued their grim service throughout the entirety of the war. While military procurement records attest to their steady production, the exact numbers of their specific combat deployment remain tantalizingly undocumented, adding to their enigmatic legacy. The very ammunition these weapons spat forth proved to be as profoundly impactful as the guns themselves. Standard Zausen buckshot loads typically contained 9 formidable pellets, each weighing 53.8 grains and measuring a significant 8.38 mm in diameter. At a mere 10 yards, the pattern spread to approximately 10 inches, at 20 yards, a lethal 20 inches, and at 30 yards, an unforgiving 30 inches. In the suffocating confines of jungle combat, where visibility often rarely extended beyond a precious 30 yards, this rapidly spreading pattern masterfully compensated for the agonizing difficulty of achieving precise aiming amidst the bewildering, dense vegetation. It transformed every shot into a terrifying, wide-area suppression tool. The Guadalcanal campaign, a grueling ordeal from August 1942 to February 1943, represented the first major American offensive in the Pacific, a baptism by fire for thousands of young men. Marines of the storied 1st Division landed with a diverse array of weaponry, including an unspecified number of shotguns, though their exact quantity and operational deployment remain frustratingly unrecorded in the terse official battle reports. The infamous August 21, 1942, Battle of the Tanaro River, more accurately known as Alligator Creek, witnessed Colonel Kiyonao Ichiki's 9-17-man detachment annihilated, with a horrifying 789 Japanese soldiers killed. While this brutal engagement features prominently in countless Pacific War accounts, primary historical sources overwhelmingly attribute the devastating Japanese losses primarily to the relentless, sustained fire of Browning M1917 water-cooled machine guns and the shattering impact of 37 Demin anti-tank guns firing canister rounds, with only fleeting, passing mentions of shotgun use. The raw, overwhelming power of these heavier weapons, it seemed, left an indelible mark that dwarfed the shotgun's contribution. Throughout the grinding Guadalcanal campaign, Marines primarily deployed shotguns for the critical tasks of perimeter defense and the treacherous jungle patrols. Rare but potent photographic evidence depicts stoic point men, their faces etched with grim determination, carrying Winchester shotguns during these perilous patrol operations, positioned as the vanguard, ready to respond to ambushes with immediate, devastating firepower. However, in the vast majority of after-action reports, the focus overwhelmingly settled on the undisputed might of machine guns, rifle, and artillery as the primary weapons, dictating the brutal outcomes of battle, underscoring the shotgun's more specialized, less central role. The very jungle environment of Guadalcanal, a relentless, humid, and unforgiving adversary in itself, presented unique and vexing challenges for all weaponry, but particularly for the sensitive shotguns. The standard, paper-hulled shotgun shells, designed for temperate climates, absorbed moisture with alarming efficiency in the oppressive, humid conditions, swelling to such an extent that they simply wouldn't chamber properly. This crippling problem, a silent sabotaging force, would tragically persist throughout the entire Pacific campaign, severely limiting the shotgun's potential until the belated adoption of more resilient brass-cased shells. The pervasive humidity of the Pacific Islands birthed a critical ammunition crisis that nearly negated the shotgun's theoretical effectiveness, turning a devastating weapon into a frustrating liability. Commercial shotgun shells, with their vulnerable paper hulls, greedily absorbed the moisture saturating the air in the 100% humidity so common in the steaming jungle conditions. Shells that would chamber with satisfying ease in dry conditions became maddeningly impossible to load after even brief exposure to the relentless tropical moisture. Marines, their faces contorted with frustration and despair, reported shells swelling so severely they literally had to be hammered into chambers, an obviously impossible and suicidal feat during the hot chaos of combat. This debilitating crisis endured for years, a persistent ghost in the machine, until March 29, 1945, when the military finally and officially adopted the all-brass M19 shell, formally designated shell shotgun brass 12-gauge number-holded buck M19. These revolutionary moisture-proof brass cases finally restored the shotgun's much-needed reliability for the war's desperate final months. This painfully late adoption date eloquently explains why so many Pacific veterans, in their poignant memoirs and recounted experiences, rarely mentioned shotguns. For the vast majority of the war, these crippling ammunition problems had severely limited their effectiveness, relegating them to a frustratingly secondary role. The United States military, ever a creature of doctrine and meticulous preparation, formalized shotgun training through Technical Manual TM9 285, a comprehensive guide published on September 21, 1942. This manual meticulously covered the nuances of the Winchester Models 97 and 12, the Remington Model 11, the Stevens Models 520 and 620, and the Ithaca Model 37. Marine training, a grueling regimen, occurred at sprawling bases like Camp Pendleton in California, Camp Lejeune in North Carolina, and the iconic Parris Island in South Carolina. The rigorous training program zealously emphasized specific combat applications, point security during patrols, rapid engagement techniques for night defense, the terrifying procedures for clearing enemy caves and bunkers, and the grim necessity of prisoner guard duties. Marines meticulously learned the Model 97's unique and terrifying slamfire technique, though experienced instructors cautiously warned against over-reliance on this feature, citing the alarming rate of ammunition consumption and the rapid barrel heating it caused. According to the Marine Corps Table of Organization E100, effective from 1943, Each Marine division was theoretically authorized a substantial 306 shotguns. These specialized weapons were primarily distributed to military police companies, pioneer battalions, and selected rifle squads for highly specialized duties. This allocation meant that while shotguns were indeed present in every major Marine operation, they constituted less than a mere 2% of a division's total small arms, highlighting their designated niche role. The historical record, when meticulously examined, reveals a striking and rather poignant absence. Japan, despite the horrors inflicted, never lodged formal diplomatic protests concerning American shotgun use. A stark and illuminating contrast to Germany's furious September 1918 complaint that shotguns brazenly violated the Hague Convention during World War I. German protests had then belligerently claimed shotguns caused unnecessary suffering, and even threatened to summarily execute captured Americans found carrying them. In a telling silence, Japanese military documents, meticulously captured and analyzed during and after the war, make no specific mention of shotguns necessitating special countermeasures. Their extensive training materials focused relentlessly on countering the overwhelming tide of American firepower in general. The relentless machine guns, the shattering artillery, and the terrifying flamethrowers, but never once identified shotguns as requiring specific tactical responses. This profound and deliberate absence powerfully suggests that while individual Japanese soldiers undoubtedly encountered shotgun fire, the weapons simply never achieved sufficient tactical impact or widespread terror to warrant official, high-level attention. Post-war interrogations of captured Japanese officers similarly lack any significant references to shotguns as particularly problematic weapons. These officers, speaking with the chilling clarity of hindsight, eloquently discussed American material superiority, the overwhelming torrent of their firepower, and their devastatingly effective combined arms tactics. Yet, shotguns appear nowhere in these crucial assessments. This deafening silence in the official record stands in marked contrast to the extensive Japanese documentation and rapid tactical adaptations concerning the far more terrifying American flamethrowers, which did indeed prompt specific, urgent tactical responses. The New Guinea campaign, a prolonged and brutal struggle from 1942 to 1945, plunged both Army and Marine units into some of the war's most challenging and unforgiving terrain. The 32nd and 41st Infantry Divisions, keenly aware of Marine experiences on Guadalcanal, specifically requested shotguns. The dense, suffocating jungles of New Guinea, where visibility often plummeted to mere single digits of yards, theoretically presented what seemed like ideal conditions for shotgun employment. However, the exact same crippling ammunition problems that had plagued Marines on Guadalcanal proved to be even more devastatingly acute in New Guinea's perpetually sodden highlands. The relentless combination of incessant rain, treacherous river crossings, and extreme, clinging humidity rendered the fragile paper-hulled shells almost completely unreliable, turning a weapon of potential power into a consistent source of frustration. Units that had initially requested shotguns, facing the grim realities of constant malfunctions, often regretfully left them in rear areas, choosing instead to rely on the steadfast M1 Garands, the rapid-fire Thompson submachine guns, and the dependable Browning automatic rifles. The Army's bitter experience in New Guinea starkly demonstrated that effective weapons, on paper, didn't always translate into real combat effectiveness in the unforgiving crucible of practice. While shotguns undeniably excelled in controlled training exercises and idealized conditions, the harsh, relentless reality of jungle warfare ruthlessly exposed their critical limitations, problems that would remain tragically unresolved until the belated arrival of brass-cased ammunition in 1945. As the grinding Pacific War slowly progressed, Marine units meticulously developed specific tactical doctrines for the specialized employment of shotguns. The weapons proved to be most valuable in three very specific and often perilous roles, providing crucial point security during patrols, establishing a robust perimeter defense against stealthy infiltration, and the solemn responsibility of prisoner guard duties. For patrol operations, designated scouts, walking on the razor's edge of danger, deliberately carried shotguns as lead elements, poised to respond to sudden, brutal ambushes with immediate and devastating firepower. The wide, spreading pattern of buckshot could suppress multiple enemy positions simultaneously, creating a critical window for the rest of the patrol to deploy, while the pointmen desperately struggled to maintain fire superiority. This high-stakes tactic demanded extensive, unwavering training and an almost telepathic trust between team members, as the shotgunner often operated well forward of mutual support, facing isolation and overwhelming odds. Night perimeter defense represented another specialized and terrifying application. Marines strategically positioned shotgunners at likely infiltration points, where the weapon's widespread pattern brilliantly compensated for the abysmal poor visibility. The distinctive, chilling sound of a pump-action shotgun being cycled in the oppressive darkness served as both a stark warning and a potent psychological deterrent to any would-be infiltrators. However, the shotgun's inherent limited ammunition capacity meant that shotgunners required immediate and robust rifle support once engaged, as their advantage could swiftly dissipate. The pivotal October 1944 return to the Philippines saw the Sixth Army make substantial requests for shotgun allocations, specifically for the harrowing urban combat anticipated in Manila. However, Marine participation in the Philippines ground campaign proved minimal, primarily limited to the vital roles of artillery support and air operations. It was the Army's 37th Infantry Division, bearing the brutal brunt of the savage Manila fighting, that bravely employed shotguns in the grim, desperate house-to-house combat. Yet, even in their after-action reports, the overwhelming emphasis consistently fell upon the terrifying effectiveness of flamethrowers and the shattering impact of demolition charges as the primary weapons for reducing stubborn Japanese strongpoints. The unforgiving urban combat in Manila vividly demonstrated both the shotgun's undeniable capabilities and its inherent limitations. In the claustrophobic confines of room-clearing operations, shotguns undeniably provided devastating close-range firepower. However, cunning Japanese defenders swiftly learned to barricade themselves in positions that prevented any close approach, effectively negating the shotgun's primary advantage. The weapons proved most effective in sudden, brutal surprise encounters rather than in meticulously planned, deliberate assault operations, revealing their inherent weakness against entrenched, prepared defenses. The brutal February 1945 invasion of Iwo Jima theoretically saw 3 Marine divisions fielding a combined 918 authorized shotguns. However, the island's unique and nightmarish landscape of volcanic ash, labyrinthine tunnel systems, and heavily fortified positions created combat conditions where shotguns played a tragically minimal role. The famous flag raising on Mount Suribachi, an iconic image of American valor, occurred only after flamethrower and demolition teams had painstakingly cleared Japanese positions, not as a result of daring shotgun assaults. Marine units on Iwo Jima primarily employed flamethrowers for the terrifying task of cave clearing, with specialized flame tanks providing crucial support. The M22 flamethrower could project its burning, viscous fuel a horrifying 40 yards into cave complexes, far exceeding the limited range of a shotgun. Of the 26,000 American casualties on Iwo Jima, existing records attribute none specifically to the absence of shotgun firepower or perceived failures in shotgun tactics, the long-awaited adoption of brass ammunition, the critical solution to years of reliability issues, tragically arrived too late to significantly impact the Iwo Jima operations. The M19 brass shells only reached some beleaguered units in late March 1945, after the battle's horrific conclusion. This cruel timing meant that Marines on Iwo Jima still grappled with frustratingly swollen paper shells, further limiting the already restricted employment of shotguns in one of the war's most intense and unforgiving battles. The April-June 1945 Battle of Okinawa, a gargantuan and bloody struggle, witnessed the full implementation of hard-won lessons learned throughout the arduous Pacific campaign. The 1st and 6th Marine Divisions theoretically fielded 12 authorized shotguns, now thankfully supplied with the far more reliable brass ammunition. However, the very character of this battle, fought largely in open terrain against deeply prepared defensive positions, offered tragically limited opportunities for shotgun employment. The Japanese 32nd Army on Okinawa had shrewdly adopted a defense-in-depth strategy, deliberately avoiding the suicidal banzai charges that had characterized earlier, more desperate battles. Japanese forces instead occupied formidable, fortified positions within the dreaded Shuri line, fighting with grim determination from bunkers and intricate cave systems that effectively kept American infantry at frustratingly extended ranges. In these agonizing conditions, Marine units overwhelmingly relied on coordinated infantry tactics, with flamethrower tanks providing devastating close support. Where shotguns did see limited use on Okinawa was primarily in the final, brutal stages of position reduction, when Marine squads painstakingly cleared surviving Japanese from captured fortifications. The weapons also served important roles with military police units, managing the massive, desperate civilian population movement. However, these applications, while undoubtedly important, represented a mere fraction of the overall, colossal combat effort, overshadowed by the overwhelming scale of other weapons. Despite the extensive and meticulous documentation of World War II combat, specific, detailed accounts of shotgun employment remain surprisingly, almost hauntingly, rare. The Library of Congress Veterans History Project contains thousands of poignant Pacific War interviews, yet direct mentions of shotgun combat are conspicuously scarce. The National Museum of the Pacific War holds over 4,000 oral histories, but detailed shotgun combat accounts are nearly absent. A profound silence. Eugene Sledge's memoir, With the Old Breed, widely considered one of the finest and most visceral Pacific War narratives, never once mentions shotguns. Despite his frontline service in a rifle company at Peleliu and Okinawa, Robert Leckey's Helmet for My Pillow similarly omits any substantial discussion of shotguns. Despite his grueling service with the 1st Marine Division at Guadalcanal, these omissions from such detailed and comprehensive memoirs, written by those who lived the horror, powerfully suggest that shotguns played peripheral, rather not central roles in the actual Marine combat experience. The few available references, often brief and anecdotal, describe shotguns as valuable for very specific situations, but rarely as primary combat weapons. Veterans, reflecting years later, recall appreciating shotguns for night security and the sudden chaos of jungle ambushes, but consistently emphasize rifles, machine guns, and mortars as the weapons that truly determined battle outcomes. This collective perspective aligns perfectly with official records showing shotguns comprising less than 2% of a division's total armament, reinforcing their status as a specialized rather than primary tool. American industry, a juggernaut of production, manufactured substantial numbers of military shotguns during World War II. Winchester, a titan of firearm manufacturing, produced approximately 25,000 Model 97s and a staggering 60,000 to 80,000 Model 12s specifically for military contracts. Remington Stevens and Ithaca contributed additional thousands to this impressive tally. This immense production capacity proudly demonstrated America's unparalleled industrial might. Yet it doesn't necessarily translate directly to widespread combat employment. Many of these robust shotguns served diligently in training facilities, with guard units, and in critical rear area security roles rather than on the brutal front lines of combat. The military police required shotguns for the arduous tasks of prisoner management and convoy security. Navy vessels carried shotguns for boarding operations and critical security duties. Air bases strategically employed shotguns for perimeter defense against saboteurs or infiltrators. These necessary but ultimately non-combat roles absorbed a significant portion of the total production. The glaring disconnect between these impressive production numbers and the sparse combat accounts strongly suggests that while America possessed the industrial capacity to arm every Marine squad with multiple shotguns, practical limitations, chief among them the persistent ammunition problems, tactical constraints imposed by terrain, and ingrained doctrinal preferences, meant that most shotguns remained confined to secondary roles. The shotgun, in essence, served as a highly specialized tool, a niche weapon, rather than a ubiquitous standard combat weapon that soldiers relied upon day in and day out. To truly comprehend the shotgun's actual, nuanced role in Pacific combat, a compelling comparison with other more widely deployed weapons proves profoundly instructive. The M2 flamethrower, a terrifying instrument of war introduced in 1943, appears in virtually every visceral account of cave and bunker clearing, its destructive power seared into the memories of all who witnessed it. Marines on Iwo Jima, for instance, employed an astonishing 27,000 gallons of flamethrower fuel, with detailed records meticulously documenting its devastating effectiveness. By stark contrast, shotgun ammunition expenditure records remain conspicuously, almost eerily, absent from the very same reports. The Browning automatic rifle, BAR, a true workhorse, served as the Marine squad's indispensable base of fire, with extensive documentation of its widespread employment and undeniable effectiveness. By 1944, every Marine rifle squad included 3 BAR teams, meticulously integrated into detailed training programs and comprehensive tactical doctrine. Shotguns, despite their theoretical authorization and impressive production numbers, never achieved similar doctrinal integration or extensive combat documentation, a testament to their niche status. Even the relatively rare M1918 Browning machine gun generated more combat accounts than shotguns, its heavier caliber and sustained fire leaving a more memorable and documented impact. Veterans vividly describe specific instances of Browning gun employment, ammunition consumption, and undeniable tactical impact. The profound absence of similar, detailed shotgun accounts strongly suggests that their actual combat use remained remarkably limited, despite official authorization and substantial production figures. The striking disconnect between the popular mythology surrounding the shotgun and its historical reality in the Pacific War reflects broader, deeply ingrained patterns in World War II historiography. Popular culture, heavily influenced by dramatic films and sensationalized, often embellished, accounts, has consistently elevated certain weapons beyond their actual combat significance. The shotgun, with its inherently dramatic visual impact and devastating close-range effect, naturally attracted such mythologizing, becoming a cinematic shorthand for brutal jungle warfare. Post-war films, eager to tell compelling stories, often depicted Marines heroically clearing Japanese positions with shotguns, creating powerful, lasting public impressions largely unsupported by meticulous primary sources. Video games and popular histories have uncritically perpetuated these vivid, dramatic images, erroneously establishing shotguns as iconic Pacific War weapons, despite the very limited documentation of their actual, widespread employment. This relentless myth-making process, while compelling, regrettably obscures the far more mundane and nuanced reality of their primarily auxiliary, often specialized roles. The mythology serves powerful narrative purposes, providing thrilling close, combat encounters and highlighting technological contrasts between American and Japanese forces. However, strict historical accuracy demands acknowledging that while shotguns were indeed present and occasionally effective in very specific scenarios, they never achieved the tactical significance, the pervasive impact, or the battle-determining influence of rifles, machine guns, mortars, or flamethrowers. The few documented veteran accounts of shotgun use, precious glimpses into lived experience, provide invaluable insights into their actual employment. Marines who carried shotguns often recalled them as useful for very specific situations, but undeniably burdensome for general combat. The weapon's considerable weight, its limited ammunition capacity, and its inherently specialized role meant that many preferred the versatile reliability of rifles for routine operations. A Marine veteran, interviewed in 1985, vividly recalled carrying a Model 97 on Guadalcanal. It was good for night watch and jungle paths, but you couldn't engage at range. When the shooting started, you wanted a rifle. This profoundly practical assessment, echoing the sentiment of many, precisely reflects the weapon's inherent limitations across varied combat situations. Shotguns undeniably excelled in their narrow niche, but they simply could not serve as the primary armament for the diverse and unpredictable demands of jungle warfare. Another veteran from the 2nd Marine Division offered a telling description of shotgun allocation. Each squad was supposed to have one, but half the time it stayed with the company gear, too specialized for everyday use. This poignant comment powerfully illustrates the persistent gap between official authorization and the pragmatic realities of practical employment. Units did indeed possess shotguns, but experienced Marines often found rifles to be far more versatile and consistently reliable for the vast majority of routine operations. The long-awaited March 1945 adoption of the brass-cased M19 ammunition theoretically solved the critical moisture problem that had plagued shotguns throughout the entirety of the Pacific War, crippling their reliability. However, this crucial development arrived tragically late to significantly impact major combat operations. By March 1945, Iwo Jima had been secured after an apocalyptic struggle, and the massive Okinawa invasion was mere weeks away. The brutal Philippines campaign had largely concluded, and the remaining Pacific battles would be fought with well-established tactics and overwhelming firepower. The brass ammunition did, however, prove invaluable for the subsequent occupation duties and the grim, meticulously planned invasion of Japan, Operation Downfall. Military planners, preparing for the horrific urban combat anticipated in Japanese cities, had requested substantial shotgun allocations. The atomic bomb's deployment, thankfully, eliminated this terrifying requirement, leaving the brass ammunition's true combat effectiveness largely untested on a large scale. Post-war analysis tantalizingly suggested that the brass ammunition would have dramatically improved shotgun effectiveness had it been available earlier. However, such speculation, while intriguing, cannot alter the immutable historical record. For the vast majority of the Pacific War, shotguns suffered from crippling ammunition reliability problems that severely limited their combat utility, confining them to a role far less impactful than their theoretical potential suggested. The profound absence of specific Japanese countermeasures directed solely at shotguns provides important and telling historical context. Japanese forces, known for their tactical ingenuity and fierce adaptability, developed detailed and often terrifying responses to American weapons that significantly impacted combat outcomes. They created intricate overhead cover against mortar fire, dug ingenious spider holes against tanks, and constructed formidable reverse, slope defenses against relentless naval gunfire. The glaring lack of similar, specific shotgun countermeasures powerfully suggests that shotguns never achieved a comparable tactical impact or instilled the widespread fear necessary to warrant such dedicated attention. Japanese tactical evolution during the Pacific War focused intensely on countering American material superiority through masterful terrain utilization and the development of defensive depth. The strategic shift from suicidal beach defenses to deeply entrenched inland fortifications, the development of interconnected tunnel systems, and the eventual abandonment of the desperate banzai charges all responded to American firepower. Generally, rather than specifically targeting individual weapons like shotguns, post-war Japanese military studies, meticulously analyzing American tactics and weaponry, extensively detailed artillery coordination, naval gunfire support, and tank infantry cooperation, but barely mentioned shotguns. This profound absence of shotgun analysis in otherwise comprehensive examinations speaks volumes about their minimal perceived impact on Japanese tactical thinking. One of the most telling and almost haunting aspects of the shotgun story is the complete and utter absence of statistical documentation. World War II, a conflict of unprecedented scale, generated enormous quantities of data ammunition expenditure, casualty correlations, detailed weapon effectiveness studies. Yet, astonishingly, no reliable statistics exist correlating shotgun employment with enemy casualties or tangible tactical outcomes. The Operational Research Section, which diligently analyzed weapon effectiveness throughout the war, produced detailed studies of artillery, mortars, and various small arms. These exhaustive reports quantified hit probabilities, casualty rates, and ammunition efficiency with meticulous precision. No comparable shotgun studies exist in the vast archives, strongly suggesting insufficient combat employment to generate meaningful statistics in the first place. Even informal estimates remain conspicuously absent from the record. Veterans readily estimate the number of rifle rounds fired, grenades thrown, or mortar shells expended. Similar, specific shotgun statistics simply do not appear in their memoirs or interviews. This statistical void profoundly indicates that shotguns remained peripheral to main combat operations, despite their theoretical presence in Marine units and their popular image. The extensive shotgun training provided at Marine camps, rigorous and thorough, undoubtedly created expectations that the harsh realities of combat experience largely failed to fulfill. Marines meticulously learned slamfire techniques, practiced terrifying jungle shooting scenarios, and qualified with both buckshot and slugs. This comprehensive training strongly suggested that shotguns would play major, decisive combat roles. However, combat reality differed significantly and often brutally from these idealized training scenarios. The controlled conditions of Camp Pendleton, for instance, simply could not replicate Guadalcanal's suffocating humidity or Iwo Jima's choking volcanic ash. Training targets, of course, didn't shoot back or force engagements at frustratingly extended ranges. The close-range encounters that so dominated training scenarios proved far less common than anticipated in the unpredictable chaos of actual combat. This poignant disconnect between training emphasis and actual combat employment tragically parallels other World War II experiences. Bayonet training, for example, consumed extensive time and effort despite minimal bayonet combat actually occurring. Chemical warfare preparation, a source of pervasive anxiety, proved unnecessary when dreaded gas attacks never materialized. Shotgun training, similarly, meticulously prepared Marines for combat scenarios that, more often than not, rarely developed as expected, leading to a quiet disillusionment. The daunting logistical challenges of shotgun ammunition supply further limited their actual combat employment. Each 12-gauge shell, a hefty projectile, weighed approximately twice as much as a standard rifle cartridge while simultaneously occupying 3 times the space. A Marine, facing brutal choices of what to carry, could carry 80 rounds of rifle ammunition in the same space and weight as a mere 36 shotgun shells. Supply ships, facing their own critical limitations, understandably prioritized rifle ammunition, machine gun belts, and mortar shells over the specialized, heavy shotgun loads. The inherently limited cargo capacity of landing craft meant that every single ammunition case required rigorous justification. Shotgun shells, serving specialized, niche roles, consistently received lower priority than general-purpose ammunition vital for the main fight. These harsh logistical realities meant that even when shotguns were physically present, ammunition supplies remained critically limited. Veterans, years later, vividly recall receiving perhaps 1 or 2 boxes of shells that were expected to last entire, prolonged operations. This agonizing scarcity actively discouraged liberal use, further reducing the shotgun's actual combat impact far below its theoretical potential, turning a powerful weapon into a cautious, sparingly used tool. Military planners, with their meticulous estimations, had initially anticipated that shotguns would excel in urban combat, prompting enthusiastic requests for increased allocations before the brutal Manila and Naha City battles. The confined spaces, the incredibly short engagement ranges, and the dire need for rapid room clearing capabilities seemed absolutely ideal for shotgun employment. However, the grim realities of actual urban combat quickly revealed unexpected and significant limitations. Cunning Japanese defenders in Manila and Naha meticulously created intricate kill zones that effectively prevented any close approach. Barricaded positions, interconnected fields of devastating fire, and insidious booby traps relentlessly kept American forces at ranges exceeding the shotgun's effective distance. The devastating firepower that made shotguns theoretically ideal for urban combat proved tragically irrelevant when Marines simply couldn't close to an effective range. Where urban combat did indeed occur at brutal close quarters, veterans consistently reported using grenades, Thompson submachine guns, and flamethrowers rather than shotguns. These alternative weapons offered comparable close range effectiveness with significantly greater versatility. The Thompson's 30-round magazine capacity, for instance, far exceeded the shotgun's mere 6 rounds, proving crucial in sustained, desperate engagements, cementing its place as the preferred weapon. While shotguns left a minimal documented impact on Japanese military thinking, they paradoxically achieved a disproportionate cultural significance in American military mythology. The enduring image of a stoic Marine with a trench gun clearing Japanese positions became iconic, almost mythical, despite the very limited historical foundation for such widespread action. This powerful cultural impact, woven into the fabric of national identity, far exceeds the weapon's actual, documented combat contribution. The shotgun, in this narrative, came to represent American pragmatism, a rugged willingness to adapt even humble hunting weapons for military purposes, defiantly disregarding traditional European military conventions and niceties. This powerful narrative appealed deeply to American self-perception as practical innovators, unconstrained by archaic, traditional military thinking. The mythology, therefore, served powerful propaganda purposes, even if the brutal combat reality proved far more complex and nuanced. Japanese military culture, deeply steeped in the veneration of rifles, machine guns, and artillery as proper military weapons, never truly incorporated shotguns into their conceptualization of warfare. This cultural blind spot supposedly left them unprepared, though the historical record strongly suggests their lack of preparation stemmed more from the shotgun's limited actual employment than from a critical cultural oversight. The intricate shotgun story powerfully illustrates the complex, often challenging, relationship between technological capability and evolving military doctrine. The weapons themselves functioned precisely as designed, delivering devastating close, range impact with spreading patterns that were theoretically ideal for the unpredictable chaos of jungle combat. However, their truly successful employment required highly specific tactical conditions that, more often than not, rarely materialized in the vast, varied tapestry of actual combat. Marine doctrine did indeed evolve throughout the Pacific War, a testament to their adaptability, but shotguns never achieved full, widespread integration into their tactical systems. They consistently remained supplementary weapons, specialized tools for very specific situations, rather than integral components of standard squad firepower. This doctrinal marginalization accurately reflected the practical realities of combat experience rather than any inherent technological limitations of the weapons themselves. The stark contrast with truly successful weapon integration proves profoundly instructive. The bar, for example, became utterly central to Marine squad tactics, with meticulously detailed doctrine developed for its widespread employment. The flamethrower, a terrifying new weapon, revolutionized bunker clearing, generating extensive and rapid tactical development. Shotguns, despite their compelling theoretical potential, never prompted similar, comprehensive doctrinal evolution or widespread integration. Military administrative records, often dry and overlooked, provide yet another crucial perspective on shotgun employment. Requisitions, detailed repair reports, and urgent replacement requests meticulously document weapon usage patterns. Rifle and machine gun parts appear constantly, even relentlessly, in supply records, indicating their heavy, sustained use. Shotgun parts requests, by striking contrast, remain notably rare, strongly suggesting limited wear and tear from actual combat employment. Armorer reports from Marine divisions show similar, consistent patterns. Rifles and machine guns required constant, extensive maintenance from the grueling demands of combat use. Shotguns, more often than not, primarily needed cleaning from storage corrosion rather than actual firing wear. These revealing maintenance patterns unequivocally indicate that most shotguns spent far more time gathering dust in arms rooms than actually being wielded in combat. Ammunition requisitions tell precisely the same story. Divisions requested millions of rifle rounds and hundreds of thousands of machine gun rounds for operations. Shotgun shell requests, however, remained consistently modest, often specifically designated for training rather than actual combat consumption. These compelling administrative records powerfully corroborate the limited combat employment suggested by the often elusive veteran accounts, painting a clearer picture of their true role. The experiences of other nations offer valuable context for evaluating American shotgun employment. British and Australian forces operating in the Pacific possessed minimal shotguns, relying instead on the established effectiveness of rifles and submachine guns for their jungle warfare. Their demonstrated combat effectiveness without shotguns strongly suggests that these weapons were by no means essential for Pacific combat success. Soviet forces, fighting across incredibly varied terrain, from the brutal urban confines of Stalingrad to the vast rural plains of Kursk, never adopted combat shotguns despite their massive small arms production capabilities. Chinese forces, engaged in desperate, close, quarters combat throughout their protracted war with Japan similarly did not extensively employ shotguns, despite a desperate need for effective weapons. This crucial international perspective suggests that shotguns represented just one tactical option among many, rather than an indispensable combat capability. Nations achieved similar combat outcomes through diverse weapon combinations, indicating that the shotgun's tactical impact remained marginal. Despite America's impressive production capacity, and certainly not a universally adopted solution, post-war military analysis meticulously evaluated World War II weapons for potential future conflicts. The Army's Infantry Board conducted extensive studies, carefully determining which weapons merited continued development and investment. Rifles, machine guns, mortars, and recoilless rifles consistently received priority attention. Shotguns, however, earned only minimal attention, strongly suggesting that their World War II performance simply did not justify major investment or further developmental focus. The Korean War, another brutal theater of close-quarters combat, saw limited shotgun employment. Marines in Korea, veterans of the Pacific, carried M1 Garands, bars, and carbines rather than shotguns for their critical patrol operations. This pragmatic choice by combat veterans, fresh from the Pacific War, profoundly indicates their realistic assessment of the shotgun's actual versus theoretical utility. Vietnam would indeed witness renewed shotgun use, particularly modified commercial models tailored for jungle patrol. However, even in Vietnam's intense close-range combat, shotguns remained specialized weapons for point men and tunnel rats, never ascending to the status of standard armament. This persistent pattern continues today, with shotguns serving highly specific military roles rather than being general combat weapons. The verified historical record supports several unequivocal conclusions about Japanese encounters with American shotguns in World War II. First, while shotguns were indeed present in Marine units throughout the brutal Pacific campaign, their actual combat employment remained limited due to a confluence of persistent ammunition problems, restrictive tactical constraints, and ingrained doctrinal preferences. The belated March 1945 adoption of reliable brass ammunition arrived tragically too late to significantly impact major combat operations. Second, Japanese forces never developed specific, dedicated countermeasures to shotguns precisely because these weapons never achieved sufficient tactical impact or caused enough widespread fear to warrant such special attention. The profound absence of shotgun references in Japanese military documents, training materials, and post-war analyses serves as a powerful testament to their marginal role in determining critical combat outcomes. Japanese tactical evolution consistently responded to American firepower generally, rather than singling out specific weapons like shotguns for specialized counters. Third, the glaring disconnect between authorized shotgun numbers and documented combat employment unequivocally reveals the persistent gap between theoretical capability and practical utility in the crucible of war. While Marine divisions were theoretically authorized 306 shotguns each, the vast majority remained relegated to secondary role-less guard duty, training, and rear area security rather than spearheading frontline combat. Veterans' accounts, when they mention shotguns at all, consistently describe them as useful for specific, niche situations, but emphatically not as primary combat weapons that shape the overall course of engagements. Fourth, the pervasive mythology surrounding Pacific War shotguns dramatically exceeds their documented historical impact. Popular culture, with its inherent desire for dramatic narratives, has elevated shotguns to an iconic status despite the very limited primary source evidence of their widespread combat effectiveness. This captivating myth-making, while appealing, regrettably obscures the far more mundane reality that rifles, machine guns, mortars, and flamethrowers were the weapons that truly determined battle outcomes, shaping the course of the Pacific War. While shotguns undeniably filled specialized niches and offered bursts of devastating close-range power, the shotgun story offers broader, invaluable lessons about military innovation and adaptation. Technical capability alone, no matter how impressive, does not guarantee tactical impact. Weapons must seamlessly integrate into doctrine, logistics, and training to achieve true, widespread combat effectiveness. Shotguns possessed undeniable theoretical advantages, yet they tragically failed to overcome persistent practical limitations that severely restricted their employment. The Japanese military's initial failure to anticipate shotguns, a perceived oversight, ultimately proved irrelevant because shotguns never achieved the tactical impact necessary to fully exploit this perceived gap. Their lack of specific preparation, in hindsight, reflected an accurate assessment of the shotgun's marginal role rather than a critical tactical oversight. The weapons that actually determined Pacific War outcomes, the crushing artillery, the relentless naval gunfire, the omnipresent aircraft, and the terrifying flamethrowers, rightly received appropriate and urgent Japanese attention and countermeasures. American industrial capacity, capable of producing thousands upon thousands of military shotguns, certainly demonstrated manufacturing prowess. But this immense capability did not translate directly to decisive combat power. The sheer ability to make weapons, it turned out, often exceeded the ability to employ them effectively in the unique, brutal conditions of the Pacific. This profound disconnect between production and actual employment powerfully illustrates that industrial might alone does not automatically guarantee tactical advantage or victory. Ultimately, the story of Japanese infantry encountering American shotguns in World War II reveals far more about military mythology and the human desire for dramatic narratives than it does about cold combat reality. While shotguns were indeed present and occasionally effective in very specific, limited situations, they never achieved the devastating, widespread tactical impact that popular accounts so enthusiastically suggest. Japanese forces were, in fact, genuinely unprepared for shotguns, as their doctrine had never considered them. But this unpreparedness proved largely irrelevant, a footnote, because shotguns played such marginal roles in determining the grand outcomes of battle. The verified historical record, meticulous production numbers, exhaustive training manuals, and precise organizational tables unquestionably confirms the shotgun's physical presence in Marine units. However, the profound absence of detailed combat accounts, verifiable statistical documentation, and specific Japanese countermeasures strongly indicates limited actual employment. Veterans who carried shotguns recall them as specialized tools, useful in particular situations, rather than primary combat weapons that profoundly changed battle outcomes. The March 1945 adoption of brass ammunition, while finally solving the critical moisture problem, came tragically too late to impact any major Pacific battles. By the time reliable ammunition became widely available, the war was essentially decided through island hopping campaigns that relied on sophisticated combined arms tactics, overwhelming firepower, and undisputed naval supremacy rather than individual close quarters shotgun encounters. The Japanese military's lack of specific response to shotguns, therefore, reflected an accurate tactical assessment rather than a critical oversight. They correctly focused their limited resources and tactical evolution on countering the American weapons that truly determined battle outcomes, the devastating artillery, the relentless naval gunfire, the omnipresent aircraft, and the terrifying flamethrowers. Shotguns, despite their theoretical close range superiority, never achieved sufficient tactical impact to warrant dedicated countermeasures. Modern military forces continue to employ shotguns for highly specialized roles, breaching doors, deploying less lethal ammunition, and in very specific close-quarter situations. This limited, contemporary use parallels their actual World War II employment far more accurately than popular mythology suggests. The weapons serve important but narrowly defined purposes rather than functioning as primary combat arms for widespread engagements. The fascinating transformation of limited historical reality into extensive popular mythology vividly illustrates how war stories evolve beyond their factual foundations, shaped by narrative needs and cultural perception. The dramatic image of Marines with shotguns clearing Japanese positions powerfully appeals to narrative needs that meticulous historical accuracy simply cannot always satisfy. The mythology serves profound cultural purposes, demonstrating an American pragmatism, an adaptable technological prowess, and a spirit of combat innovation. Even if the historical record proves more mundane than the thrilling tales, understanding the actual role of shotguns in Pacific War combat demands a rigorous separation of verified history from accumulated, compelling mythology. The weapons were present, they were authorized, and they were occasionally effective, but they never achieved the tactical significance that would justly warrant their prominent, iconic place in popular Pacific War narratives. Japanese infantry may never have expected the sudden, thunderous blast of 12-gauge American shotguns in the assault. But this initial surprise ultimately proved largely irrelevant to battle outcomes that were overwhelmingly determined by superior American firepower, meticulous logistics, and devastating combined arms tactics. The verified history tells a less dramatic, but profoundly more accurate story. Shotguns served as specialized weapons for particular situations, tragically handicapped by ammunition problems until too late in the war, employed primarily in secondary roles, and never achieving sufficient tactical impact to significantly influence the grand outcomes of the Pacific War. This sobering reality may indeed lack the dramatic, cinematic appeal of mythology, but it represents the undeniable historical truth that patiently emerges from careful, painstaking examination of primary sources, poignant veteran accounts, and comprehensive military records. In the end, the story of Japanese forces encountering American shotguns reveals as much about the powerful human tendency towards military myth-making as it does about the brutal actualities of combat. The weapons achieved a profound cultural significance that far exceeded their tactical impact, becoming symbols of American pragmatism and raw firepower despite very limited documented combat effectiveness. This glaring disconnect between mythology and reality serves as a powerful, enduring reminder that popular military history often, perhaps unconsciously, emphasizes dramatic narratives over the complex, sometimes mundane, historical truth. The Japanese infantry, who indeed never expected 12-gauge American shotguns in the assault, were right to be surprised by their unexpected presence, but profoundly wrong to fear their actual, widespread impact. The weapons that truly defeated Japanese forces in the Pacific, overwhelming industrial production, superior logistics, coordinated combined arms, and relentless naval power proved far more decisive than the occasional, localized blast of buckshot in the unforgiving jungle. The shotgun story, properly understood and stripped of its legendary veneer, illustrates not American tactical innovation through unexpected weapons, but rather the intricate, often challenging, relationship between military capability, actual combat employment, and the enduring power of historical mythology in the brutal tapestry of the Pacific War.